when you have disabilities like this, and for people like me, when you say you can't do this, it's like holding up a red flag.
Yeah.
Somebody says you can't do it, I get very stubborn very fast. So
you're like, hold my beer.
Exactly. You're correct.
Hi, welcome back to Let Me Ask You Something, the weekly podcast where I, MD Pittman, talk to everyday ordinary people about something extraordinary in their lives. Now, this week I talked to Doug Noll. He's an inspiration just for being. He was born partially deaf, partially blind, along with some other health issues, but he's overcome that to be a second-degree black belt in a martial arts, and he's a motivational speaker. He's written books. He's just an inspiration. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Doug Noll.
Now, welcome back to Let Me Ask You Something. We are live here with Doug Noll for Season 2, Episode number 4 of the Let Me Ask You Something podcast. We'll just jump right into this, Doug. So let me ask you something. You were born nearly deaf and nearly blind. What's that like?
Mike, in one word, it's brutal. I was born partially deaf, almost blind, crippled, 2 club feet, couldn't walk until I was 3 years old, had 4 surgeries before I was 3, left-handed, bad teeth. The only line I was smart enough to get in was the line for intelligence. I got a really high intelligence. But, and here's the thing, I mean, I look back on it, it was really painful. The whole thing, my whole childhood was just awful. But finally in the 4th grade, when I wasn't doing well in school, a nurse decided to test my eyes. They do that routinely now, but back in the 1950s, they didn't do that at all. And all of a sudden they realized I got 2400 vision. I can't see anything. So I get these big black plastic glasses with Coke lenses.
Yes.
And now, I mean, too smart, wearing the glasses, not really much of an athlete, buzzkill for the girls for the next 15 years.
In the Army, we had those, the glasses. I wore glasses. I had LASIK, but now I wear readers. But we had the big brown turtle shell glasses. Oh, mm-hmm. We called them BC glasses for birth control glasses. So I get it.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. And my mother, my 93-year-old mother, who I love dearly, we talk about it, and she says, we did not do well by you. I mean, we grew up in affluence. I grew up in a very affluent community in Southern California. So money wasn't the problem, but it was just that in those days it was Dr. Spock reigned, and he said, don't coddle your children, don't support your children, let them figure it out on their own. And they did that with the rest of my brothers, who were all pretty normal. But for me, with all my problems, I needed a lot of extra support, and I didn't get it. So Fortunately, I learned a lot of lessons, good lessons.
Well, yeah.
And today, I was going to just say, today I've never been happier.
Well, that's good. So, you overcame these disabilities, and you became a second-degree black belt, I assume in karate, or?
I did, a Northern Chinese style. Actually, when you have disabilities like this, and for people like me, when you say you can't do this, it's like holding up a red flag.
Yeah.
Somebody says you can't do it, I get very stubborn very fast. So
you're like, hold my beer.
Exactly. You're correct. So
watch me.
I became a secondary black belt and then a Tai Chi master, but I did that in order to pass my level 3 certification exam as a ski instructor.
So how does that work with your nearly deaf, you're nearly blind, you have club feet? I mean, how does that work?
Well, it works by teaching myself how to learn, essentially. There was nobody out there that could really coach me, nobody out there that really wanted to coach me.
Yeah.
And so I really had to teach myself, and I learned how to learn. That's really the secret. I learned how to learn anything. And so, in the beginning, I did stuff because, I just thought that partly the family was doing it, my family was doing it, and so I had to do it. And then eventually I got to a place where I really liked taking on challenges. So I learned how to fly an airplane, fly helicopters, martial arts, whitewater rafter, and when I was much younger, class 4 kayaker, whitewater kayaker, mountain rock climber. I live in Central California, very close to Yosemite National Park. And so I got into the mountains and doing a lot of outdoor stuff. And the only thing I really had to, I did have to overcome a lot of stuff. My balance wasn't so great. That's why I tended to do upper body sports like swimming and kayaking and rafting, stuff like that. Skiing is obviously lower body, and there were plenty of days when I was both teaching skiing and also just skiing for recreation, where the next morning I couldn't get up. I mean, I got up and I couldn't walk for 30 minutes. The pain was so intense.
So who did you teach skiing to? Because, I mean, I've never skied, but if I come up with a ski instructor who said they're partially blind and partially deaf, I'd be a little nervous.
Well, you know, the thing about it is that because you don't become a ski instructor unless you're a pretty good skier and a very good teacher.
Yeah.
And I was always a good skier, but my teaching was superb because I remembered the frustration of learning how to ski from people who didn't know how to teach. Mm-hmm. And they certainly didn't know how to teach people like me.
Yeah.
So I made it a point to learn how to teach the how, not what to do.
Yeah.
Bend your knees, $5, please. You know, not to tell you what to do, but to tell you exactly how to do it. And that meant that I had, in everything that I ever did and have ever done, I've had to break it down into tiny little pieces. What exactly am I doing right now? And what does it feel like? And how do I explain it 3 ways? Visually, auditorially, and also kinesthetically.
Yeah.
And those are the 3 learning modalities. And I just learned how to do that. And so I was actually, and you know, if I hadn't gone to law school, I'd probably still be a ski bum and a whitewater bum. Because I love doing stuff.
But you've just lived an eclectic life. I mean, it's just you're kind of a Renaissance guy, doing a little bit of everything.
Well, people say that, but you know, I have acquired a lot of skills and done a lot of really cool things in my life, but it's just a function of me deciding this is something that I want to do and knowing that it's going to take a long time for me to master anything. I'm a slow learner. I'm not some guy that gets everything all at once. Like right now, my big thing is jazz violin. I played bluegrass and old-timey and Irish fiddle for a long time, but 11 years ago, I decided to take up jazz. Little did I know how difficult that was going to be. But I knew 12 years ago when I started that this was going to be a long journey, and I didn't know how good I was going to get. And I've exceeded my expectations about what I would be able to do with jazz. Now it's moving from being an okay jazz player to being a really superb jazz player.
So what motivates you? I mean, what really gets you out of bed in the morning to not only do what you're doing, but try something new?
Well, 3 things. First of all, I'm intensely curious. Second, I'm super stubborn when it comes to learning. I don't give up. And 3, what really motivates me these days is service to humanity. So it's the service work that is really important to me, and that's my daily work and the other stuff. All these hobbies and stuff I've acquired, that's for fun. But what really gives me great joy and satisfaction and happiness is knowing that I am making a huge difference in the world for a lot of people.
So talk a little bit about that. What do you do to make a difference in the world?
Well, I'm a lawyer-turned-peacemaker. Very rare breed. You don't hear many of those. I was a trial lawyer for 22 years. And then I went back to school and got my master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies and quit a very lucrative, profitable, successful trial law practice to become a peacemaker. And I literally walked out of my firm after 22 years with 1 week's notice and left $10 million on the table. 10 million more I'd put in. I just didn't want to, I was tired of it. So I walked away. And that was the best decision, not the best financial decision I've ever made, but it was the best life decision that I ever made. As a result of making that decision, I had all kinds of new opportunities open up to me, and probably the 2 most significant things that happened was, 1, I discovered a skill around how to de-escalate angry people that was absolutely the most powerful thing I've ever experienced. And the second thing that happened was starting the Prison of Peace project with my colleague Laurel Coffer. And for the last 12 years, at least up until the pandemic, we and our trainers have been going into maximum security prisons, training lifers and long-termers how to be peacemakers and mediators.
Okay. I want to get into that a little bit, but you said the best decision you made was to walk away, and a lot of people equate success and happiness with financial success, but not you. I mean, can you talk a little bit about the difference of why this was the best decision?
Yeah.
With leaving that money out, and I mean.
Okay, so I can, from experience, I grew up in affluence. I made a lot of money as a lawyer. My first wife spent a lot of it. Lived in a big house on 20 acres, drove a really expensive car, went on really expensive vacations to 5-star resorts. I've done it all. It's not worth it to me.
Yeah.
Today, I live in an 1,100 square foot home with my second wife, who I'm dearly in love with, never been happier, on 10 acres, further up in the mountains than where I used to live. And every day is just a day of joy.
Yeah.
It's not, as long as you can do what you're really passionate about and you feel like you've got meaning in your life. And for me, it's serving others, helping other people. That's all that matters. The money flows. Yeah. I don't make the same kind of money I made before, but we got plenty.
Yeah. Yeah. So with the Prisoners of Peace Project, talk a little bit about that. What do you do? How does that work? What do you do when you go in and talk to one of these hardened criminals?
We've seen a lot of those.
Yes.
Well, the project started, maybe that's the way to begin. The project started when Laurel got a letter from a woman serving a life sentence without possibility of parole in the largest, most violent women's prison in the world, which happened to be about an hour and 15 minutes from where I live. And that woman, Susan Russo, asked if Laurel, who was a mediator like myself and also a professor at Pepperdine University like myself, come in and teach the lifers how to stop the violence as mediators and peacemakers, because they were tired of the violence in the prison. And Laurel called me up when she got the letter. She was at her mailbox, in fact, and read it to me and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think we should do this." And because I wanted to test my de-escalation skills, and I thought, what better place to test my de-escalation ideas than in a maximum security prison teaching lifers how to.
Baptism under fire right there.
That's it. Ask test. So we said yes. It took us 6 months to finally get the approvals to start, and we started with our first 15 women in April of 2010. Today, for the first 6 to 7 years, it was pro bono. And then when the state started seeing the results we were getting, they decided to start funding us because we were about ready to give up. It basically almost bankrupted both of us. But the state started giving us grants. And I still don't make, I couldn't make a living doing prison of peace. Laurel is more she's more full-time than I am. But we would go into prisons, and we went into some of the roughest prisons in California. Corcoran, I was at Corcoran for 2.5 years, which is one of the two maximum security supermax prisons in California. And I was working in level 4, which is the highest security, with guys that were coming out of gangs. So we're in the gang debriefing program. And these were very violent men who were looking to change their lives. And we get a handful of them into prison of peace, and it was just amazing to watch what happened. Today, all these years later, we are in 15 California prisons, a prison in Connecticut, 12 prisons in Greece. I just had my first phone call with 4 colleagues who are going to be starting prison of peace in northern Italy, in the Milan area, as soon as the pandemic lifts. And I've got another colleague in Nairobi, Kenya, who's going to be starting prison of peace there.
Okay.
So
why is this important to you? Why is this? I mean, yes, you were intrigued by doing it and wanting to do it, but why is this an important part of your life now?
Because of how it affects so many thousands of people. When we go in and train inmates how to be peacemakers and mediators, it is a very rigorous, difficult curriculum. It's the most difficult thing they've ever been put through. And the basic training is 84 hours over a year of actual classroom training, and then many, many more hours of practice. We have watched inmates, almost every inmate we've worked with. Well, first of all, we've had a couple of thousand released. No reports of recidivism or reoffending. None of our students have ever reoffended. We have watched remarkable transformations, especially from lifers and long-termers, people who are in because they probably killed somebody. And the transformations that they made within themselves and what they've been able to do with their families and what they've done for those who have been released, what they've done on the outside, and the stories they tell us about how their lives have changed because of what they're learning. It's, as Laurel and I say, this is something that once you start, you cannot not do it.
Yeah.
It's so satisfying to work with these people.
It's like a ripple, like the butterfly analogy.
Japan,
flapping a wing in one end of the world creates a hurricane in the other, or
That's
one ripple in a ocean at one end creates a tidal wave in the other. But yeah, I mean, it's just it just expounds on itself.
It's amazing.
I know. Yeah,
they've done an amazing job.
So you've written a book too.
Four of them.
Four of them. You
got the last.
I got the last one here. So you've written 4 books. Why? So I mean, you know a lot about this topic. You've written I guess the most recent one is the How to Calm an Angry Person in 90 Seconds or Less.
Right.
Then you have Elusive Peace.
Right.
And then Peacemaking, the practice of intersection of law and human conflicts. It's a lot of content for 3 books to have like this. Because you have another one that's I don't think it's
a religion.
Yeah, that's not really related to peacemaking, but I guess in a way it could. But how much more do you have to say about peacemaking? I mean, are we going to see more books on this? I mean, this seems like a very simple. It seems like it's very simple, but it's very complex.
It is. I probably have. I mean, if I get motivated, I have at least 2 more books in me. One book is on the lessons that I've learned since publishing De-Escalate, which was published in 2017, because I've learned a lot since then. And the other one is whether or not I should write a book about the Prison of Peace Project. And I'm not sure about that. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
De-Escalate came about as a direct result of the prison work. Inmate after inmate after inmate would approach me. Students would approach me in prison saying, could you please write a book? They knew I was an author, and they asked, could you please write a book that we can share with our families about what we're learning here in prison from you? Because they see the changes, they can't believe it, and we need something that we can have them refer to so they can understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wrote the book. And that was the easiest book I ever wrote. It took me about 6 weeks to write the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
And the first publisher my agent submitted it to said their audience is too dumb for my book, which I thought was pretty funny. And then the second people were Beyond Words, which is part of Simon & Schuster, and they picked it up immediately. And I had the manuscript in to them by right after Thanksgiving in 2016. And then in February of 2017, my agent got a call from the publisher saying, we're fast tracking your book. It's going to be published in September of 2017, because the president of Atria read it. And this was during the election and all the chaos going on. And just thought that this was a really important book to get out. So it was one of the fastest books they've ever published. They did it in 7 months, start to finish. Normally they take 2 years.
Yeah, that's true. It seems like this could be in practice, not just with prisoners, but everyday life.
That's right. It's a foundational skill of life.
Yeah. Now, you are also a keynote speaker. I assume you haven't been doing many keynotes lately with the pandemic, or have you?
You know something? The pandemic, I'm actually doing more than I did before the pandemic because it's all virtual.
Yeah.
And it's a lot less expensive when people are doing virtual conferences to just have me pop in for an hour or two and talk about this stuff. It's a lot less expensive for them. And they can... So it's kind of amazing. I did my first live workshop in 2 years in late May. And the rest of all my workshops have been all virtual.
So what's that like? What do you do when you are a keynote speaker? How does that work?
Well, obviously, when people are looking at a screen like a Zoom screen or something, or a Teams screen, you gotta present a little differently, because all they're seeing is a face. And that means that the way that I present has to be a lot more engaging in many, many different ways. And so the way I do that is by jolting them with jolting my audience with counterintuitive, counter-normative statements that shock them. That makes
like what? Like, can you give an example?
We have been lied to for 4,000 years.
Okay.
We are 98% emotional and 2% rational. It's not the other way around.
Yeah.
4,000 years, theologians and philosophers not only have gotten it wrong, but have literally lied to us, because we are emotional beings first and only a little bit rational. And this is what neuroscience is teaching us. So once you begin to understand that we are emotional beings, the way you look at human behavior and human nature completely changes. If we hold people to the standard of rationality, which is a false myth and very abusive, very few people, then it looks like just human behavior is just all over the place. It's totally unpredictable because people just there's something wrong with them. They're irrational. But if you flip that and say, oh, we're just emotional beings with small moments of rationality during the day, then it makes total sense. Oh, of course, we're just being emotional. And so now what we have to do is learn how we have to learn about emotions and learn to become emotionally competent.
Yeah.
Which is not taught in schools. It's not taught in university. It's not taught in the families. It's a whole new skill set that, that's called for in the 21st century. All these problems we got in our country around political polarization and all this stuff going on, it all comes down to emotional competency. It doesn't matter which side of the political fence you're on, people do not feel validated.
Yeah.
It's emotional.
Yeah.
If we can start learning how to validate people, which is what I teach, then you may still and probably will disagree on some stuff, but you will find that the common ground is much greater than the divisive ground.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the peacemaker in me.
Yeah. Is there still stuff that you're learning about this? I mean, it seems like, as I said, it seems very simple, but it's very nuanced and very complex. Is there still stuff you're learning as being a peacemaker?
Every day. So I'm constantly reading. I'm always looking at the science to find out what's the latest and greatest, what are people talking about, and also I'm looking at, well, what are people, where are the idiots? So for example, I read a very well cited scholarly article on what's called job embeddedness. These academics trying to figure out how to account for the Great Resignation, and that article was said something to the effect that emotion has very little to do with resignation. And then they listed all the factors, and every single one of those factors was an emotional factor. I just shook my head and said, what a bunch of boneheads. They don't get it. They're so caught up in their jargon and they're thinking that this is all rational that they miss the forest through the trees.
Yeah. Can't see the face with I'm mixing the nose for the face. Yeah.
There you go.
I mix my metaphors up sometimes, more times than
especially with a couple of whiskeys.
So what's one thing that you would like, the 30-second elevator pitch here? What is something that you tell someone to you have 30 seconds to de-escalate something? I know you take 90 seconds in the book, but how do you de-escalate something if you go into an elevator and you see a problem, or what do you tell somebody how to do something?
Where do you go? Oh, there you are. All right. So it's a 3-step process. First of all, if it's an elevator pitch, I'll say, if you're really interested, what I teach is how to listen other people into existence. How to listen others into existence.
Okay.
And you're going to do that in 3 ways. 3 steps. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to ignore the words. Doesn't matter what they say. You're just going to ignore the words. The words mean nothing, especially angry words if somebody's really angry. Mm-hmm. You've heard it all before. There's no news here. Ignore the angry words so that you don't get triggered and so that you free up the bandwidth to do the next 2 steps in your brain. The next thing you're going to do is just be silent. Not going to respond with any kind of words or anything. You're just going to be silent for a moment and let your brain process the emotional experience that this speaker is having. And I call that reading emotional data fields. And the beauty of it is we don't have to work very hard at it. Our brains are hardwired innately to be able to do this for a whole bunch of reasons going back to evolutionary biology. And if you sit in silence for a couple of seconds, emotions will start floating into your consciousness. And all you do then is the third step, which is to reflect those emotions back to the speaker with a very simple use statement. You don't use I statements. You don't ask questions. It's just a simple, direct statement. So I'd say, man, you are really angry. You're really pissed off. You feel disrespected. Nobody's listening to you, and you feel completely ignored. And it really frustrates the heck out of you. And you're a little anxious because you don't know quite what to do about it. And they make you sad because you feel like you've been betrayed by people that you trust. And you feel abandoned. And the whole thing just wrapped up in a bundle. It's just really infuriating.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You can feel the difference, even though
yeah.
But you can feel, oh my God, this guy's really listening to me.
I was waiting for more.
Oh, right. And I could go on and on and on. But the reason that this works is demonstrated by a brain scanning study done in 2007 by Matthew Lieberman at UCLA. And he showed that when we put feelings into words, and it's called affect labeling, label the emotions of another person, the emotional centers of the brain quiet down as the prefrontal cortex comes back online. And so what we're literally doing is lending our prefrontal cortex to the speaker for the time it takes for the speaker's prefrontal cortex to come back online. And when it comes back online, the speaker immediately calms down. And once they're calm, they're de-escalated. Once that person is calmed down, now we can think about, okay, is there a problem here that needs to be solved or figured out? But there's no way we can help a person with a problem when they're emotionally upset, emotionally escalated, really angry. And yet, what do? We jump into problem solving right away. Well, maybe you should do this, or, oh, it's not that big a deal, or we get defensive, we get angry, or, we have all these automatic unconscious responses to emotions that do harm, not good. But when we validate their emotions, magic happens. It's amazing.
Yeah. Now, you have done this with prisoners as well as, I think, was it to a senior analyst at the Congressional Budget Office?
I got called into the Congressional Budget Office a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic broke out.
Okay.
To go back to Washington, D.C. and train the senior analysts in these skills because they were having a lot of problems with a very contentious Congress. Mm-hmm. And I taught them how to listen to members of Congress and their staff, and before trying to justify or defend or problem solve or anything else, calm them down. And that's what they did, and it worked beautifully. I've taught teachers how to do this in high schools and middle schools. I've done, of course, a lot of corporate workshops teaching leaders and managers how to calm down angry employees, angry middle managers, people like that. Taught just regular people how to do this.
Wow, so. And that's important, especially now where you got a lot of angry people out there for one reason or another. A lot of it's around politics nowadays, but you're going to have a lot of angry people out there, and this is a very important skill to learn.
Absolutely. And once you learn it and you start, it doesn't take long to master it. If you practice it the way I teach it, you can usually have pretty good mastery in about 3 to 4 weeks, where it just becomes automatic and natural, and you don't even think about it. And I mean, of course, the emails and letters and stuff I get from people are so gratifying about how it has changed their lives in really dramatic ways.
Right.
I got a black pastor up in Connecticut who I've become quite close to, and he actually served time in prison too. And but he uses this now, and he's using it especially in his premarital counseling with young couples, and he says it's just amazing.
That could save a lot of marriages because the divorce rate's high, and
That's right. And I got just a quick story on that. I got an email out of the blue. I got an email from this guy by the name of Bob, and he says, my wife is a client of your wife's, and she told me to read your book and then take the course, and I did. And she separated. She left me because I've got Asperger's and I'm kind of an asshole, and I always tell people what to do, and I'm a problem solver, and I'm a serial entrepreneur. I made a lot of money, but I got a lot of personality problems. He's writing this in an email. Never heard of the guy.
Yeah.
And he said, I read your book, took your online course, and I started doing what you told me to do, texting my wife. And she texted back and said, there's hope for our marriage. And he said, thank you. A month later, this is in May. A month later, in June, this year, I get an email from him, and he said, dear Doug, my wife and I are in Maui, celebrating her birthday and our 25th wedding anniversary. Thank you very much.
Wow. That's a great story to end on there.
That is
Well,
that is my work.
Great. Well, wonderful. Well, Doug, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for being on my podcast. And yes, it's been a pleasure. This has been fantastic.
I created the web page for everybody in your audience to go to. Only
Okay.
your audience can get to it. And the web page is, let me get it here. There it is. DougNoll.co. Let me ask you something. All one word, no hyphens.
All right.
DougNoll.co/ let me ask you something. All one word. And when you go there, that'll give people entry into my website so they can look around all the stuff I've got. But I also have some free stuff on that page. You can get my book, De-Escalate. You can get a video course on how to de-escalate somebody. And then if you want to spend a lot of money, you can really learn from me on how to become emotionally competent. So it goes from free to Cadillac, whatever people want.
Well, great. Well, Doug, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for that. And again, Thank you very much for being on my podcast.
All right. Great conversation. Thank you.